Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Divided We Fail, a front porch chat political podcast. I have Cody and James here, and we're going to have what seems like becoming our norm, which is a current events episode. We're going to I promise, we're going to get back into the swing of things about nailing down a topic and briefly uh, touching on current events. But there has been so much going on with the executive order mandates coming out left and right that there is just a lot to talk about. But before we get into that, obviously, we have our weekly check-in. James, I believe you have a big update for our listeners.
Yeah, so recently, I've become a waffle person instead of French toast. That's what you're going after, right?
No, but sure.
Yeah. Oh, you mean, so I'm now a father
Congratulations.
of a beautiful little boy. He has been a blessing.
All I
There's
could,
nothing like being a dad.
when you said beautiful little boy, all I could think of, I don't know what it was the way you delivered it, but all I could think of is Finding Nemo. Now he's a father looking for his little boy.
Uh, no, you know, everybody told me, there won't be any feeling like it, blah, 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 blah. I thought it was all
Bullshit.
mumbo jumbo that you just, you lose sleep and you just get more emotional, but it's true. It's true. It's true.
Yeah, I believe you.
So,
I'll be sure to check back in on that bright spirit that you have in about 4 months.
yeah.
I remember when Brittany and Emma
Check back
had
in.
their child. We went over. I can't think of how old she was at the time, but we went over, and Brittany was standing over Emma, and she's just like her low. I can't remember what was even said. It was nothing that was super funny, but I'm looking over to her, and her lower lip is quivering like it is before she like breaks out into like tears of laughter. And then she just starts laughing maniacally. I'm like, what is wrong? And she's like, I don't sleep. I'm delusional. And I was like, oh, okay.
I
So,
will I will check back with you when that child is like 6 years old
Yeah.
and see how you're doing then.
well, Cody, unlike you, James is going to beat his child. So,
That's fair.
Well,
I'm kidding. I actually,
beat is a strong word.
I don't, I don't, I don't think you're gonna like brat. You're not gonna Adrian Peterson the kid, but you know.
No, 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 no. There's going to be a lot of who the fuck do you think you're talking to? There will be a lot of that.
That's fair. I've tried that. Doesn't go well in my favor, but I've tried.
Yeah, it's you know what? That's a can of worms that we can unwrap outside of this podcast.
Yeah, it is.
Um, but congratulations, James. I can hear it in your voice that you are with the proverbially glowing. Obviously,
Yes.
we have to do a wellness check. How's the wife?
She's good.
She's good. Good.
Had a little bit of complications, but
She's
we're good.
she's cooking.
She's recovered back to normal-ish.
Nice. And then you get to
She's a
enjoy
little
how
tired.
how much paternity leave do you get?
I get 12 weeks. I'm taking 8
Wow.
off the jump.
That's a lot.
That is pretty
Paid
good.
family leave.
Yeah, that is pretty
New York
good.
State paid family leave. Kind of happy I live in New York
That
because of that.
explains a lot because we get. I think the work gives us 4 weeks because one of the guys took 16. He took 4 months, and I think he did 12 for paid family leave or what is it
PFL. Yeah, paid
PFL?
family
Yeah,
leave.
yeah, PFL, and then he took the 4 that the work offers as well. So he got 4 months total. But good. I'm glad you get the bonding time. The skin to skin's important. Jumping over, Cody, how was your week, dude?
No, it was good. Everything feels like the world's on fire, and it is insane how much they charge therapists to do their job
Don't
in
you
this state.
don't you reap the benefits? Oh, I see what you're saying. The state charges you to keep your license.
Correct.
Gotcha. Well, the state's got to get their cut. You know what? Actually, I want this is a perfect segue to a conversation I had on Facebook today, which was that obviously we live in the state of New York. There is a plethora. There are myriad things that are really really annoying about the way this government is run. But this guy so eloquently said that because Hochul passed a, a legislation to protect doctors from basically getting doxxed for prescribing
Oh, getting sued for prescribing
abortion medicine, because now legally they can just put the firm. They don't have to put the doctor's name on the prescriptions.
Right. So you can't sue the doctor if you don't know the doctor's name.
Correct. And so obviously there were people that were up in arms about that. But this guy commented, and he goes, every once in a while I'm brought back down to earth because I realize that in New York State I am privileged enough to have to bitch about stupid taxes and not the loss of my civil rights. And I was like, you know what, man? You're right.
Not wrong.
Because
I
am sure, Cody, that you would rather live in a state that charges you to keep your license knowing that your wife and your daughter are at least safe regarding their medical situations.
Yeah, she's not going to college outside of this state or the Northeast, but that's for a different conversation.
Well, that's also free to go in New York, so.
That's also fair. Makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't blame. Yeah, it's a protection thing. Obviously, I was going to say because of the Northeast, like the New England is just as safe as New York is.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where like it puts it into perspective. Like, yeah, it feels like things are going to shit, but the way we have our country set up, it really is. The way we should be viewing it is more like the EU. Like the states have so much power over their regional legislation that as long as you're living, and it sucks to say this, but it could lead to like I guess inter-American migration, but as long as you're living in a state that is relatively safe, like you can fight the good fight without having to worry about protecting your own ass, which is nice. It's a blessing, and I wish that upon a lot of other states. And if you notice, if you guys paid attention, when this very topic was quote unquote on the ballot, every state that it was on the ballot on, it passed except for Florida, which requires a 60% vote record, which is insane. It passed like 56-44, and that's a failure. It did not become codified for protections for women's health care in Florida, which is, they literally wrote that law to stop like majority rule, which is insane to me, but I won't digress into that. My point being is that even really conservative states like Kentucky, states like Kansas, states like North Carolina. Well, North Carolina is really shifting blue, but you get my drift. Like those southern, even Tennessee voted in favor of abortion protections when put to the general public, which just goes to show that the general consensus is that civil rights matter, and if we would just leave things up to a majority rule, we'd be fine, which is going to get us perfectly into our current topic, which is the fucking executive actions that are coming that are definitely not majority rule. Obviously, we just had the situation with the tariffs. You guys are aware that the situation with Canada was already prearranged prior to Trump taking over, right? Like the whole thing that they supposedly agreed to.
I was not aware of that, no.
Yeah, so obviously, for those who might be living under a rock, Donald Trump was slated. He announced Saturday he was going to pass 10% increase to tariffs on China, as well as 25% tariffs on Canadian and Mexican goods.
Right.
And those were supposed to go into effect on Tuesday. Monday, there was a flurry of news, phone calls, blah, blah, blah. All in all, Mexico allegedly agreed to put 10,000 troops on their border with the U.S. in an effort to help fight and stem immigration. And Canada agreed to put 1,000 more, was it RMCP, Royal Mounted Canadian Police? Yes. RMCP people on their border areas, and they're also going to employ more aerial oversight, like helicopter runs and stuff like that, and that is an effort to stem the flow of fentanyl from Canada into the U.S. But the important thing to note is that people unearthed the treaty that I say treaty, but the agreement that Joe Biden had signed with Trudeau in an effort to fight fentanyl, and that was a joint coalition between U.S. Border Protections and Canadian Border Protections, and everything that was in there was already agreed to. The only thing that was changed was like they added like an extra 100 hours of flight time, and so like that's a minimal yield, but like it just goes to show that it's just a dog and pony show. Like this is a situation where we have all of this international relationship, our world, I guess, reputation is taking a dump. Like for the most part, Canada's like our best friend. I mean,
Yeah.
it should be an open border, in my opinion. We have very similar values, if not identical values, besides like how we structure our government. Culturally, we're very similar. Ethnically, we're very similar. So, like, I just don't understand why there's any trepidation between the two countries. Obviously, stemmed from a Republican administration. But my point being, now that relationship is stymied and put a bit through the dumpster right now because of one dude and people who don't understand how NAFTA, or I guess it's not how NAFTA anymore, but, and that leads me to my second point, which is that he implied these tariffs because of, he said, what was quote unquote unfair trade deals as well as the border stuff. The last trade deal we signed was under his administration. So did he sign a bad trade deal? Is that what he's trying to say? Obviously, it ended up being just a fucking flex to get people on the border, but like, it's not going to solve anything. The vast majority, I think it's like 80% of fentanyl that comes in the country is done through shipping channels. So like putting a helicopter in the sky isn't going to look in the back of a truck. We need more Border Patrol agents that can inspect trucks.
Yeah.
I think a lot of this tariff stuff when it comes to Canada and Mexico, it was more just a way to get them to the table. Because obviously tariffs are bad for both sides. Like, no one wins when you start throwing down 25% tariffs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think at the end of the day, it was just mostly his way of saying, we're going to do this until you can sit at the table and we can talk. I feel like that's all it was. There's zero part of my mind that he actually planned on imposing those tariffs on either country. Maybe Mexico, but I don't think he was going to do it with Canada. I think it was more of a, listen, we need to talk. This is going to happen. You know what? Like, it was an empty threat. Because obviously, like you said, the concession was 100 more hours. I don't think that Trump necessarily saw this as a win. If that makes sense. Like, he wasn't. I think it was just to get people to listen to him.
Right, which is why I was going with like a dog and pony show, because especially, I understand Mexico. Mexico's been flirting with Chinese influence and Russian influence, and Claudia Feinbaum is not particularly a fan of Donald Trump. But even during his first presidency, Justin Trudeau by no means was a, I guess, promoter of Donald Trump. But as far as my understanding, no matter who the president's been, the Canadian Prime Minister is a phone call away. Mm-hmm. Any second of the day, and for the most part, it's never been like hostile negotiations. I'm sure he could have been like, Justin, come down to Washington or I'll go to Ottawa, but we got to figure this out, without having to drag the entirety of like a population into what is now a reputation between two peoples. Because I mean, I'm sure we all are hockey fans. We all saw the fact that in Toronto, Montreal, and Ottawa, they're booing the U.S. national anthem, and that's not anything we voted for.
Right.
And that, like,
I think it's all, again, it's Trump's personality, his ego.
Yeah, it's all big stick with him. He doesn't speak softly.
Yeah. It's not hey, let's come to the table. It's, we're going to do this. Now you're forced to come to the table.
Right. I guess we could have saw coming, because what was it, like, ever since his election, he's been calling Canada the 51st state.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just,
and maybe we're more sensitive to it because it's right here. You know, it's 20 miles away. It affects our economy if they stop coming over. And so we could be more sensitive to, like, taking offense to it. But I just feel like one of the great strategic assets that the United States has is the fact that we are close partners with our two border nations, which helps keep everybody protected. And I know people say, oh, the U.S. is always protecting Canada. False.
Canada will do some shisty shit if
Well,
they need to.
Canada will do shy shit, but also Canada's landmass protects us. Their existence protects us from an invasion from the north. Guess what? It's not going to be us jumping into Canada first thing. If Russia just decides to come across Alaska or even around Alaska, because we're pretty well fucking defended up there, and down through the Northern Territories, it ain't going to be us. It's going to be them, and vice versa. If they come up through relationships with like Colombia or whatever, like any adversary that we have, their only way for a land invasion, because you're not getting it on our coasts, is through Mexico or Canada. And the only way to ensure our constant safety from that, which makes us uniquely strong, is the fact that neither of our border countries would ever do that to us. And so we don't have the steep history of Europe where everybody's invading everybody all the time. We've never had that issue besides like the war of like, I think it was the War of 1812, and it wasn't really Canada. It was England, and then they dragged Canada along because Canadians always talk about the last time that the U.S. and Canada went to war, they burned the White House, but like it wasn't Canada, guys. It was Britain. But that so that
I get that the landmass helping America, but America will never be able to be taken, even if Canada had Russian soldiers lining up on their borders. There's too many guns in America. There's too many people that at the end of the day, if you try and invade America, you're not getting very far. I mean, we could like they could easily go through certain parts of the country that don't have as many people.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, like there's a gun behind every blade of glass.
I understand
what
I understand what you're saying, but I'm just saying what I'm trying to say is that there is an added
it's a layer of protection.
Right. There's an added aspect of impossibility knowing that neither of our border states would allow you to like establish up a beachhead and camp. Like it's just not so like now not only do you if you wanted to come in and attempt a land invasion, you can't you now have to basically deal with Canada and Mexico too because they're not going to allow it either. And so as opposed to being like, hey, we're going to buddy up with Mexico, they're going to let us in, we're going to be able to put everybody on the southern border and then go in that way and form a beachhead. Like you can't do that. And same thing with Canada. So like it's important. I think it's really important to keep really friendly ties with your neighbors. That's all.
No, and it is. It's very important. I mean, look at Ukraine.
Right.
You know, they got attacked from a couple different areas. So, like, I agree that maintaining that relationship is very important, but also at the same time, we still have to be independent from that. I guess if that makes sense. Like, I don't know. I still firmly believe even if Canada did allow it or Mexico did allow it, there's too much going on in America. It won't happen.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think, you know, we do there has to be a fair trade-off.
Yeah.
That's just where I'm at. And
It's fair.
I think the biggest problem I like with Canada, like yes, there are people coming in from Canada, but I feel like Canada also does a better job of protecting their borders than Mexico does, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, whereas Mexico has cartels, Mexico has all that. Like, there's more inherent threats from Mexico than there is Canada, and it feels like it feels when I say that it makes me feel like I'm being racist, but it just there is. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So like when he started with the whole tariffs on Mexico, I was like, okay, whatever. The Canadian ones just kind of confuse me. But at the same time, one of Trump's biggest things that he's always ran on has been bringing jobs back to America. We have a lot of companies in this country that go to other places for cheaper labor that I don't feel that I feel like they shouldn't be allowed to do that, I guess. Like, for example, Nike, all of its productions are done over in China. There's no reason they talk about, oh, it's cheaper labor. Okay, but you're still selling your jerseys for $130 a pop for the cheap ones. That costs you maybe $20 to make. You know what I'm saying? So like there's shit like that where I think companies like that should be taxed relentlessly.
Right, I don't disagree with you because realistically, that in and of itself is just about greed, right? It's not about anything else. It's about the CEO being able to make the company as profitable as possible and getting to increase their salary. There are plenty of companies whom don't do those things and do just fine.
But I feel like that's a better way to solve these issues than
Well, you also
tariffs.
but we also need to accept the fact that we are never ever going to have America be a manufacturing hub ever again. It's just not going to happen. If we were to make every part and piece and run the assembly line on a Ford vehicle in the United States using labor from the United States, even non-union labor, because obviously like Tesla and those guys have non-union labor, the cost of a Ford Fusion, which is now like $22,500, would be like $37,000 or $38,000. Like, it's just not. We wouldn't be able to financially sustain having our labor pool be in the United States. We have transitioned our economy to a skill and service-based economy, and there's no going back from that. I understand people are like, we need to bring manufacturing back. The way we do that is what we're doing right now with moving the chip fabs and stuff like that. Like, we need to rethink the strategy, because low-end manufacturing is never coming back to the United States. It's just never going to be competitive.
No, because everything will become unaffordable. I get what you're saying. I don't disagree with that concept. The only way that doesn't happen is if you limit how much the top people in the company make, and they're never going to sign on to that, which, right, goes into the whole thing of like companies shouldn't be considered individuals and lobbyists shouldn't exist because it's basically just legal fucking strong manning, which this isn't the mafia, so that's not how things should be done. But
Lobbying is nothing more than legal bribes.
right,
That's all it is, legal bribing.
right,
Right. And the number one reason I think that lobbying should be illegal is because I can't sit down with my senator and just like, offer them $500,000 to not pollute my lake, but Halliburton could. And that's not really fair. And in terms of like the law, Halliburton is viewed equally to me.
right, and that's just immoral and insane.
They're like, oh, well, their facility is in the district, so they're considered a constituent of the district as a single entity. And it's like, no, dude, that's not a person.
But they're not. They're just not. So it's that sort of stuff where this gets dicey. And then, right, like you have to, for something to work efficiently, the CEO has to not be an egomaniacal individual. And for the case of a good portion of large company CEOs in this country, that is just not the case. I think it's 1 in every 4 at the least CEOs of large corporations in this country have some degree of narcissistic personality disorder.
And what's crazy is the companies that have CEOs that like aren't like that aren't doing too bad. Like, you have like Costco, you have Ben and Jerry's.
Fucking Costco. The average wage for a full-time employee at Costco is $30 an hour.
Right. You have that.
That's the average starting wage.
You have, obviously, like Ben and Jerry's doesn't have like massive retail shops, but like their ice cream is more than affordable, and they pay everybody in their chain like a very livable wage. I think the minimum salary is like $55,000 or $60,000, and then you have, and they're also only sourced locally. So like they're in essence single-handedly keeping the Northeastern dairy business alive. I say single-handedly, that's not true, but like they're a big proponent of that. And then you have smaller, but they're co-op or not co-op based corporate, but relevant corporations. Like in our area, we have Stewart's. If you guys didn't know this, Stewart's has the most millionaire employees of any franchise or corporation with more than 30 locations in the world.
That's fucking crazy.
And the reason for that is that it's they structure the company as a co-op. The CEO from like the 80s came in and changed it around. He's like, I think we'll have more production in a better, because he basically was going to like all these like dive gas stations that were like kind of like people that didn't care and stuff like that. And he's like, how do we change that? And then they were like, okay, well, what if we make it so that way, in essence, the employees own. Surprising, yeah. It's exactly. It's a co-op. So, and this is what quote unquote communists say when they say workers should have a chunk of the means of the production that they're creating, the wealth that they're creating, because it incentivizes more production. So yeah, they have the most employees that are millionaires because basically those employees work there for 15 years. They get equity back from the company that they can then sell off in the form of stocks, and that's how they become millionaires. It's like, I think it's like something like 15% of the workforce for Stewart's is a millionaire in terms of like if they were to liquefy all their assets. It's insanity.
Right.
And you're a manager for a gas station, dude. Like, I'm not trying to like talk down on that profession. What I'm saying is like that doesn't require any it requires soft skills, but doesn't require any like hard educational skills. You don't have to like understand engineering. You don't have to understand psychology. You don't have to understand like these immensely difficult concepts. You just have to basically start out as a person and understand how the company works.
Right, but it's a company that treats their employees well, cares about their employees, reinvests in their employees,
right,
and is profitable and doing well as a result.
Right.
And it's just not that complicated. It really isn't, because in order to get the profit sharing, like there's a vesting period, there's all these things, right, that save the employer money over time because you're not hiring people for the same position over and over and over and over and over again. You're getting people to buy in to actually wanting to do the work and move up and see how things work. It is such an efficient system where what happens at places like Tesla is you just fire 80% of the people to make the company more profitable.
Yeah, the quintessential layoff before the fourth quarter statement.
Right. It's how do we turn a quick profit? Oh, we fire 80% of the workforce. And then next quarter we'll hire 20% of them back, give them a 5% raise, and then tell them they have to do the work of 20 people.
Right. But anyways, so that we got off course there, but like that's why this idea that we're gonna like make America what it was in the 60s and 70s, it's just not happening. And so if we actually put our resources into what would be considered high-end manufacturing, stuff like fab shops, stuff like nuclear energy or nuclear anything really. I'm trying to think of some other like high-end manufacturing, rocket technology, like those kind of things. That kind of manufacturing is what we're capable of because we are a I don't want to say a high-end society, but we're on the upper chain of like how you say. So there's low-skilled labor, which is like places like Taiwan, the Philippines, Malaysia. Well, Taiwan makes chips, so maybe not Taiwan, but you get what I'm saying. Like your sweatshop nations, and then you have
places that are more susceptible to being exploited by larger companies, and typically they have more people who fall under the category of low-skill labor.
Right. It's not about really like I'm eliminating like exploitation from them. I'm talking about like just like the availability of, we'll say the availability of education, right? Because like the nation as a whole doesn't have the infrastructure to support a high-end educated society. So you have those, I don't want to call it developing nations, right? So, and then you have your mid mid nations or middle level nations, which are nations that probably have a good education system and a good base of society, but they don't have the numbers to be able to handle high skill, high end manufacturing. These are your Canadas, these are your Englands, these are your Japans, those kind of things, where it's a really robust population, but they just don't have the infrastructure, the capability to handle that kind of stuff. That's where a lot of like the situations like with our cars. The reason why it passes the border so many times is because like the shit that's cheap to make, we make in Mexico. The stuff that we want fabricated together, we send to Canada, and then it comes back and we take all the pieces and put it together here, which is the final process and the hardest part. So we do the hardest part. And then it's like like countries like us, you think of the U.S., you think of Germany, you think of, well, I guess Japan, but that's in cars only. Like they don't really have much technology.
Yeah.
But China is a
Like
really
Mazda, Honda, Hyundai.
yeah. China's a really unique thing because they're like a communist, capitalist country. Like they have really good like manufacturing, but they don't have it as high as us. Like they have chip manufacturing, but because we don't sell the patents, they can't make chips as good as we are. Like Nvidia is literally not allowed to like release their chip technology because they don't want the Chinese to be able to make it. But that's a different situation. But like that, it helps you visualize. Like it's like the top 1% of nations do high-end manufacturing. The top 30% of nations do midline manufacturing, and then everybody else participates in low-skill labor. And it's just like not how we're structured. And I just wish that we would get off this constant urge to like go back to the days of like factory workers that paid good. Like the trades still pay really well. Manufacturing, if you can find it, now that it's like it's going to require education. You can't just walk into a chip manufacturing company and have a job. They're not going to do that. Like you're going to have education, and we should fund that education. We should make it so that way non-traditional adult learners can go to school for free, which New York is doing. If you are, I think the new law they're going to pass that extends the Excelsior scholarship, where like if you're over 30 and have worked in a field for like 5 or more years, then you can qualify for extended learning to either advance that field or change careers. That'll be free. It's up to an associate's level. So like that's the kind of stuff we have to think about, because no one's going to go back, and it's proven right now with the immigration thing, like the fact that we're cracking down on ICE with ICE and like immigrant labor is not showing up to the farms. The farmers are like, nobody is showing up. That's your proof in the pudding right there that Americans will not do low skill labor. They just won't do it. Why would you go bust your ass picking strawberries for $16 an hour when you can jump into Walmart for $20 an hour? Like you're just not going to do it. So we need to forgo that fallacy. No one's going back to make teapots and tanks for $60,000 a year and going to go work their 9 to 5, listen for the whistle, and walk home. It's just not happening. And so we need to move on. We need to formulate a plan to move forward and build a better society off of what we have for a skill pool. End rant.
Well, and I think education needs to be at the forefront, which it'll need to be universal education. People will need to have access regardless of means, which plenty of people aren't for in this country. I'm for it. I think universal education should be a basic human right. You should have access to knowledge. It shouldn't be restricted. It shouldn't be that complicated.
And the counter argument to that is going to be the fact that you get high school for free.
You do get high school for free, but how much actual knowledge does any one person gain from high school? The answer is not a lot. You don't get to choose what you study. You don't get to specialize. You do to an extent, but not to a good enough extent to make yourself viable for skilled labor.
Right, and that's where I think we should change. I do not. Don't get me. Don't make me. I don't want you thinking, because I agree with like a bachelor's degree should be free. I also think a master's degree should be free if it's required by the state that you live in to attain your career, especially if it's a publicly funded job. For instance, like if you worked for the VA, like your master's should be covered because you have to get it to get the job, and they need people to have the job. So like cover my fucking master's. Teachers.
Or if it's a job that's in high demand, right? Like, hey, you will pay for your education to do this thing that is in high demand. And so like there's a teacher shortage, there's a healthcare worker crisis.
And that's another thing that's super fucked up, is that the U.S. actively recruits outside of our own country. We talk about bringing labor back to the country, and then for those high-end jobs, instead of providing education and building an internal pipeline that allows for us to fill doctors, lawyers, teachers, nuclear physicists, you name it. Like instead of like building our own internal pipeline with education that's either A, free, or B, incredibly affordable, we seek out nations like India, China, Pakistan, Germany, and then we go pluck them from there where they don't pay anything for their education, and they get to reap the rewards of our economy despite having not paid into it. And I'm not trying to sound xenophobic because I'm not. I'm happy those people are coming here. I'm just saying that like we could build our own system where people like us can get PhDs in nuclear physics without ever having to sit with our parents and say, hey, do you think it's viable for me to get my PhD in nuclear physics? Because that'll end up being about $170,000 in student loans. Do I think, is that a viable career for me to be able to afford that? Because I'll just be basically a professor, which makes like, $65,000-$70,000 a year. So I'll probably never pay off my student debt. We won't have to have that question. We can just progress as a society.
Well, and right, like
we
my
lose
point
James
in this, I don't
I'm
know.
here.
Okay.
I'm just listening.
My point in this is there is a lot of resource hoarding by the upper like 10% of our country,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't allow us to go any further as a country. There are too many people, and the upper 10% is such a small amount of people that the resource hoarding can't continue.
Right, but in order to change that, it requires a complete rethink of how we see our society. And so that's kind of like what I'm advocating for here is
Right.
we
And it
know
requires people to be able to acknowledge that they were wrong. I don't know what is so complicated about the concept for adults. I really don't understand because there's no possible way you can know every possible thing, even if you are the best in your field. There is no way that you can know everything 100% inside and out, and it's just the human brain is not capable of it.
well, it's twofold because you'd have to A, admit that you were wrong about your projection and interpretation of your worldview, and B, in order to really progress as a society where in which we utilize free adult education to change careers and things like that, you have to basically admit that you're not an asset anymore. Like I don't provide value to my society because I don't have the skills required for that society to function at its peak. And that's a really hard thing. That requires you to be incredibly self-aware because you have to look at your skills. Like, yeah, okay, you worked in the mines for 20 years. We don't fucking have mines anymore, dude. What are you going to do with that? Figure something out. Go be a project manager, go do something. But like you admitting that like all this thing I spent most of my adult life doing is now a useless skill is very difficult to do.
Well, and admitting that
I mean,
you
I don't
no
think.
longer can function because the world you grew up in and were functioning in no longer exists in the same fashion.
Right. James?
I think so. What you were just talking about, I'm kind of going through right now
Mm-hmm.
because there is a job that I would like to have that requires a degree,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't feel like my my skills or me in general has no use or is defunct. It's I do what I can to advocate for. All right, let me put this in just explain it
Yeah.
detail. So I work with people with developmental disabilities, no college degree, have a high school diploma, yada yada yada. There is a job I want to do within my agency that I don't think it makes my skills defunct or non-important because I'm trying to say this without sounding arrogant, but what I do is important. Um, it's
What you do is very valuable. I'm inclined to agree with you.
it's they put that I need this certain degree for a job that I feel like I'd be able to handle pretty okay on my own that I am now going to go for, but it's not because I feel valueless, it's because I want to do more, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Like I see change that I could make that isn't being done, but it doesn't take away from my position or the people who also hold my position, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
So, well, I mean, I kind of agree. In some situations, you have to look at it and say, like, hey, what I'm doing isn't really necessary or is no longer needed. there are certain situations that it's different. And I also feel like we're a little bit past it, but I was letting you guys go because it was an interesting conversation. When we talk about free college, I don't think realistically it's not possible, right? Especially right now, with the way our government spends money and sends money places where really shouldn't be sending money. But I do believe that having education that is not only available at like a quality education post school, but making it affordable is also extremely important. You can't tell me that most of these schools need $40,000 per student to operate. You cannot convince me of that.
Right. That's all
There's
administrative costs.
0% chance. Yeah. And a lot of like now with the younger generation even coming up, where my generation coming up, I signed up for all my classes by myself online. There was no need to go talk to a counselor and get it squared away. Like, I get they're busy and they do other stuff other than that, but like these administrative costs they talk about, I don't see it. I don't see where all this money is being spent that you have to charge. I mean, Syracuse University was $40,000 when I was in middle school.
It's
Yeah, I think it's
62.5 now.
and that's
give or take.
before room
So,
and board, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's
yes.
$80,000
So,
room and board.
Or no, that's after room and board. Harvard, maybe it is. No, I think it is before room and board. You're right. Harvard
but
is
that's
75. But the point being made is that Harvard in the early 70s or maybe late 60s was $2,500 a year.
Harvard is like Doritos. You go there, you're paying for the name.
Right, but
You're paying for I graduated from Harvard.
right, but my point
That's all
still
you're paying for.
stands in that Harvard used to be affordable on a summer job, right?
Yeah.
College used to be affordable on a summer job, and it is no longer because the rate of inflation and the amount at which people feel like they need to amass money, typically for greedy reasons. The president of SUNY Oswego, which is a state college where I got my master's degree, makes $300,000 a year. The assistant to the president makes $171,000 a year.
Syracuse University's total cost of attendance for an undergraduate in 2024-2025 is $88,560.
That's a house.
And that's, mind you, that's for one of 4 years.
The outgoing Harvard president made $1.3 million in 2020. And I get that being the president of a college is stressful, and I get that it requires a lot of work, a lot of public relations, a lot of things, and you have a lot of people to help manage that under you. No one needs to make $1.3 million a year. There's just it's unnecessary to make that much per year.
Right. And not to get off topic, and I understand one of the biggest, I guess, people which surprised me that are anti-college, not anti-free college, are people who are alumni from these private universities because they basically see them as going to the wayside. And I, in all of my brilliance, have thought of a way to offset that. So
Allow people to pay for private college. Let public college be free.
right, and what you do is, because in essence the state is going to allocate that money per student anyways already, right? So they're already accounting for that. So say somebody like you have a brilliant kid who wants to go to Syracuse or Cornell, or St. Lawrence or Clarkson, any of those private schools that cost a ton of money and have really high prestige. The state has an average cost of SUNY schools, and that's money in your pocket. You can take that off your private student tuition. That's guaranteed. That's a guaranteed grant that you get. That's already going to make the college more affordable for you. And as far as I'm concerned, that offsets the damage being incurred because you're getting the same benefit as the person who's going to the SUNY school.
Yeah. The the other part of this, right, is like appropriately taxing people who make over a certain amount of money. Because there was a time in which the
Yeah.
US appropriately taxed people who made over a certain amount of money, and it made things more reasonable for people who didn't make that much money.
But this is a lack of education too, because people hear, I'm going to increase taxes on X money, and I don't know if it's a
I don't
delusion
think
that they're
it's a
going to
lack
make
of,
that money.
but that's it, right? It's the personal fable, which is a psychological phenomenon that everyone is susceptible to, and it is this line of thinking that either the bad things aren't going to happen to me. The most common example of this being, right, like having sex in high school and thinking that, oh, I'm not going to get pregnant. It's not going to happen to me. If you're not taking proper precautions, there's a chance. And it's this personal fable of maybe one day I'll be rich and I don't want to have those taxes applied to me. I have a master's degree, as does your wife, Travis. Your wife, I don't know about, James, and you just
She
stated
does.
that oh, she does? Okay. So, and my wife also has a master's degree. We have the same job, and our jobs require a master's degree. And I can tell you, we don't make over $200,000 a year. I'm not even sure we make over $150,000 a year. And there's two of us with master's degrees.
Right, and there's. I would wager not, because you're in a higher income bracket, like city, as in like the cost of living is higher, so like the overall average wage is higher than Watertown.
Yeah.
And Chelsea and I have no problem disclosing this. This tax year combined pulled in just over 130, and I think you guys make a little bit more than us, but like not a ton more. So I bet you're hovering on that 140, just under 150 range.
Right. But I will never be rich. It won't happen. And I'll give you the
Powerball.
top five. It's not going to happen. The top five paid CEOs in 2023. Anyone familiar with TPG Inc.? Either way, the CEO in 2023, John Winklereed, interesting name, $198 million. That was his salary for the year. Harvey Schwartz, the Carlyle Group, $186 million. Hock Tan, Broadcom Inc., $161 million.
Yeah, and these are all hedge funds. They're all equity firms.
Right. They're all people who make money off spending and investing your money. There is no reason, like, there is no good reason other than resource hoarding and greed that someone needs to make that much money a year. I don't even give a fuck if you have a yacht. Like, if you make $250,000 a year and you want to spend your pennies buying a yacht, knock yourself out. But $161 million a year, you can't spend it. You can, but just on nothing that is necessary for sustaining a reasonable quality of life.
Right, and if we taxed at 99% everything over, say, even if you wanted to go really conservative, everything over 50 million, right? We tax every ounce of income over 50 million. Two things happen. One is what happened when Henry Ford was kicking off and they had the 99% upper tax bracket. And basically the way that they got write-offs was by contributing to their local economies in their local areas. So like Henry Ford basically built the city of Detroit on the taxpayer dime because he wanted to avoid paying taxes, because he viewed it in essence as a waste of money. And so he provided housing, he provided stores, he provided basically a local economy for everybody who was working in the Ford factories, because he had to invest that money somewhere, otherwise it was just going to go to Uncle Sam. And that's what these companies will do. In order to get a better tax break, to get a better bottom line, they will just flood money into the areas where they can avoid basically paying taxes. And if we close the loopholes with offshore accounts, crank up the upper end of the tax bracket, guess whose income tax will probably go down? Yours and mine.
Well, and so we talked about Costco and the CEO making less than every other CEO. So if one of you wouldn't mind looking up the Walmart CEO salary real quick while I go on this. For the fiscal year of 2024, Costco's CEO will make $1.15 million, and that's it.
This is gonna make you mad.
What's Walmart's CEO's
Walmart's
salary?
CEO salary is $26.9 million, but here's the best part. Of this total, 1.5 million was received as salary, 4.5 million was received as bonus, 19.6 million was awarded in stocks and other compensation.
Yeah, and Costco's Costco CEO last year did make a total of 12.2 million with bonuses and other things, but that's just because the company did well, and they still pay their employees $30 an hour at a starting rate. They still do all of these other things and provide some of the cheapest goods available.
Ben and Jerry's CEO's salary is currently frozen.
Why?
Basically, he was like, "I make too much. I've made plenty of money." So the current CEO had a contract of $1.95 million fixed salary for 10 years. At the end of the 10 years, which was basically at the beginning of COVID, Schumacher froze his salary, so it's hard at $1.95 million. And then Ben and Jerry's CEO compensation rules, which was passed by their board, rules that the CEO's maximum salary can only be 5 times the lowest paid employee.
Right.
So in order to give the CEO a raise, he has to raise the lowest salary.
Right, but what about that is so complicated that you can't take care of the people who make you the money? Because let's not forget, the CEO does a bunch of things, but the jobs that make the company function, they do not do.
Right, they oversee a ton of shit, and I'm not saying that they shouldn't be paid equitably, but it's like you said, like saying that one person
$26 million is not equitable.
Yeah, saying that one person is worth 300 to 500 times more than another person is just ludicrous.
Yeah,
because as far as I know, it's the general managers and the district managers who are in the shit for a lot of these corporations, because a lot of them are retail corporations. Like, yeah. I would bet that the stress of a general manager of a Walmart's day is exponentially worse than the CEO of Walmart Corporation.
I mean, we know a personal friend we can ask about that.
Right. And just to hammer home, so officially now, the CEO's salary for Ben & Jerry's is $905,915 a year, and then which
translates to $436 an hour, correct?
Right, but basically, and then the 1.95 comes from bonuses. He basically gets bonuses based on performance and sales, which that should be how it is. The base salary of a CEO should be dog shit, and then I say dog shit, but the base salary shouldn't be in the tens of millions, and then they should get purely bonuses. I hate the idea of stock options unless it's like forced retirement, because then that encourages them to do the bullshit, which is where they lay off 80% of the workforce to boost the profit margin, so that way it looks like they had a good quarterly statement. Then people buy the stock price goes up, they have a sell-off, and they do a stock buyback. So they're basically creating a cycle to encourage bad behavior by offering stock options.
Right. Elon, Tesla,
every corporation ever.
Yeah. I'm pointing out a very large.
Like, it's come out now that the payment protection plan, the PPP loans that came out, the vast majority of that money was used for stock buybacks, not for salaries.
Right. And there are companies who performed poor so that they did not have to pay those back.
Yeah, and majority of the companies didn't pay them back, but people are mad about student loans.
Right. And I think there was an article that did research where it said, and I can't remember, I think it was NPR or maybe CNN, who knows. The research stated that the number of PPE loans was so much larger, like the total amount in the state was so much larger than the total amount of student loans in that particular state.
Yeah. I believe it. And we had no problem wiping those away.
Right. Like it was nothing.
Right. And what's crazy to me, and I understand we're fully off the rails now, and I've accepted that.
Yeah.
What's crazy to me is that when it comes to student loans, the forgiveness of student loans would have such a far greater impact on the economy than the forgiveness of payment or paycheck protection plan loans. Like,
yeah,
the ability for an entire, basically, I say an entire generation because obviously, like, James is, I don't want to say new to the college loan thing, but he didn't go nearly as far as like you and I did. I don't think he's sitting on $100,000 in student loans. I could be wrong, James. Am I wrong?
No.
Okay. So my point being, like, he was able to get a house. You were able to get a house with the help of obviously Steph's parents and stuff like that. But you get what I'm trying to say. If you eliminated that debt and unsaddled that entire generation of people, imagine the exponential growth. You're going to have small businesses starting up. People are going to be able to pursue dreams. There's going to be major purchases that occur. It would fuck the housing market because there's already there's not really a shortage of supply. It's just a fucked up. I don't know how that would work. The housing
There's
market.
companies that are buying houses to then resell them and make money. Yes.
Yeah, but the overturning of whatever, I forgot what the Obama era protection was, but they overturned that protection that made it so that way private equity firms couldn't buy houses, and that's what's got us in our situation. We're basically going through the big short again.
Yeah.
So, like, fingers crossed for the inevitable housing market crash, rooting for that. But my point remains is that it would help so much more than cutting taxes ever would. And it's going to cost the same. If you cut corporate taxes by 5%, it's going to cost the same amount of money to the U.S. government as eliminating every single dollar of student loan debt.
Yeah. If I got an email tomorrow saying that my student loan debt was forgiven, I wouldn't be stress-free, but I would be a hell of a lot less stressed financially.
Right. I personally would really love it, and it's a fucking pipe dream. But I would love it if we had an administration that cranked up the corporate tax rate, because we're the largest economy in the world. They're not going everywhere. They can say what they fucking want. They're not going anywhere. They're liars.
Right.
They're going to pay their fucking taxes. Crank up that, make a slush fund, and then just one day be like, guess what, everybody? Today's start fresh day. Boom. Your credit card debt's wiped out. It'll never happen because credit card debt is what drives income for these banks, because that's what allows them to give you a 17.5% rate instead of a 4.5% rate, because quote unquote you're a risk because you have, your credit cards are maxed out. But I'm just saying that would be what I would do if I could live in a perfect world. I would just be like, here's your fresh start. Everybody gets a fresh start today. If you fuck it up from here on out, that's on you. But we had the 2008 housing market crash. We had COVID. We've fucked our housing market. So everybody's kind of in the shit right now. Here you go. Here's a fresh restart. Let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, I have a good credit score, like a really good credit score. I have 0 credit card debt, and the rates on my credit cards are 22, 24, and 24 respectively.
Yeah, I mean, the credit cards are going to be that way, but if you got a loan, your loan would be like 4%, 5%.
Yeah.
Like credit cards, they're supposed to be high interest because you're supposed to. They want you to pay off the debt before it goes through, basically.
Right, but even that, like, all of these things are so predatory.
Yeah.
In nature.
Right, and then there's the unwritten rules. Like, they give you a $15,000 limit, but really, like, under the table, it's really like a $5,000 limit because they only want you to use 30% utilization. And if you go over that, your credit takes a hit, even if you pay your payments on time. And it's like, okay, but that's a whole nother podcast. I'm not going to get into that because then we'll be here till fucking 11 o'clock at night. My point being, for a quick recap, folks, tariffs.
Before we recap,
yeah,
there are 2 things I want to rant about real quick.
Yeah, go ahead, rant.
First of all, Allen Media Group. I don't know if you guys ever heard of them.
What media group?
Allen Media Group.
Oh, Allen.
I do not know Allen. No.
They're not really around here. But anyways, so recently they have laid off a large amount of meteorologists.
I was going to say, I looked at
some of which.
Yeah, it's the Entertainment Studios, Inc.
some of which live in Louisiana, Alabama, Georgia, and Mississippi.
You mean
They're
places
now
with very
switching,
inclement weather?
yes, all of which are in Dixie Alley, which is
Tornado Alley, right?
Tornado Alley's cousin, I
Okay.
guess is the way I'd word it. They're laying off meteorologists in lieu of the Weather Channel tickers on the bottom of their screens. Now, I doubt you guys have, but again, I have problems. I have sat down and watched hours of actual coverage from historic tornado events. All of them, one thing in common. There's a man or woman in front of the screen explaining everything.
Mhm.
Details. It's coming down this street. Which side of town you're on. Here's where it's coming. We're playing a dangerously fun game of when is going to be the next EF5 tornado. We haven't had one since 2013, which is
Is that Joplin?
yes. No. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Maybe there's more. I don't know. You threw me way off.
Sorry.
So we are no 2013 was more
Oh,
tornado.
okay. Joplin was 2011. Got it.
Yes. So um we're staring down the barrel of when is the next one going to come. Um, not going to get too in depth into it. A lot of people think it won't because of the way the EF scale is set up. Yada yada yada. We're taking away meteorologists in places that have this weather
Mhm.
and replacing them with the Weather Channel, which again you probably haven't. But during tornado outbreaks and stuff, if you watch the Weather Channel, it's not that great of coverage. So this is, in my opinion, an extremely dangerous and stupid game to play. Then, as far as I know, they haven't said why they're doing it,
Because to save money.
and essentially, and I thought, you know what, I'm gonna come on here and rant about it. It'll be my weather rant for the week. But no, Oklahoma decided to step it up and be fucking stupid. Senator Mark Mann of Oklahoma City came out with a new. They're working on passing a law that would require professional storm chasers to apply for a license by passing a background check, submitting their vehicle's insurance information, and a letter of endorsement from a chief meteorologist or designated official, or students applying for storm chaser licenses would also have to pass a criminal background check, insurance, and then a letter from their dean of their school in order to storm chase in Oklahoma. Now, again, not sure you guys know much about weather. Oklahoma is
A hotbed.
hot. This license requires you to work for a local news station or be a member of some school, and it would cost you $500 per year or for the calendar year, and then a $250 renewal.
Okay.
I don't know if you guys watch a lot of weather stuff,
I do
but I
not.
do. I watch a channel called Ryan Hall. Y'all, Trav's heard of it. I know he has.
Yeah.
He has live storm chasers on the ground for all tornado outbreaks and such. Those storm chasers that he has would no longer be able to work with him in Oklahoma. They wouldn't be able to storm chase in Oklahoma while working for him because he's not a meteorologist. He doesn't work for a qualifying media outlet. The amount of times I've seen one of his chasers on a storm that was not storm warned is insane.
Right.
You spend a
Like,
very extensive amount of time watching these things.
Yes, he does.
I do. I do. But again, storm chasers 9 times out of 10 have taken classes, have taken yada 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 to get to before they storm chase. A lot of them are National Weather Channel or National Weather Service storm spotters, which, fun fact, Travis and I both are. for winter weather. But again, these people have a very important, like they do a very important thing for the communities by calling in these storms, by being on top of things, and pretty much giving the National Weather Service and local communities heads up that, hey, this tornado's coming. It's barreling down on your town. You may not hear a warning, but I see it on the ground. Or as James Spann likes to call it, ground truth.
Right.
By limiting that in Oklahoma and pretty much making it so unless you work for a weather channel, you are putting people in harm's way, in my opinion. I think it's a dangerous game to play, especially in this area. Like we can talk about laying people off, like and like the meteorologists and stuff. You're still going to have your National Weather Service warnings, but these are the people that give those the national call the National Weather Service and say, "Hey, this is on the ground."
Right.
You know, these are the people that are seeing it and calling it in. These are the people that are stopping. If you watch any storm chaser videos, any storm chaser live streams, whenever a big tornado hits a town, they're one of the first people in there doing what they can to help. Whether it's pulling people out, and they're not doing it for the views at that point. They end their live streams. They say we're done, or you just see a car sitting and they're out of their car doing things. These storm chasers are much more than just guys driving around trying to shoot off fireworks into storms. What unlike Twisters would make you believe. Like you're these are you're getting rid of people on the ground who are protecting people, who are saving lives. And they set it up in a way so people like Ryan Hall, which I don't know, Cody, you've probably never heard of. Don't worry, I'll send you videos. Um, he live streams during tornado outbreaks, hurricanes, snowstorms, everything, and he calls out where these tornadoes are coming. He's better. He's like a local meteorologist, but he does it on YouTube.
Gotcha.
Yeah, he covered Helene pretty intensely.
He covers all of them intensely.
Oh, I know. I'm just
And
saying.
not only that, he has a charity and he donates money to these people who have had their lives upended by storms. Gives them money and supplies and such. But again, a lot of these storm chasers that work for him, that work for other YouTube channels, that work for their own, that storm chase, to take them out of your state completely unless they are affiliated with a news station, which then in turn gets anything they get is now property of that news station. That's why there's so many that don't work with news stations because you can sell those photos of a tornado. You can sell your photos of a hurricane. You can sell your photos of everything and make money, and that's how a lot of them live. You're taking all of that out of your state and doing your state a huge disservice. But these guys are just parading around like it's the greatest thing they've ever done. And it's foolish. And if it does pass, there will be lives lost because of this law. End of rant.
All right. So for a quick recap, we started out with executive orders, which pandered into tariffs, which then became an economic review and ended talking about layoffs in the meteorological industry. So it's been quite the ride for you guys. We're coming up on an hour and 10 minutes. Is there anything that either of you would like to say before I end the recording?
No, I've ranted enough.
I'm sad.
James had the floor for what he had to say.
Yeah.
Okay, so we will be back next week. I believe the goal is to talk psychedelic drug treatments, right?
Yes.
All right. Cody, if I'm not mistaken, you might have some insight on that because didn't you want to get like a ketamine license?
Yeah, we were looking into it, and I did a 17-page research paper on ayahuasca in undergrad.
Yeah,
So
we're
I have a little bit of information on that.
yeah, you guys are gonna see structure next week. It's gonna be crazy. It's gonna be sick. And that's assuming that we don't end up at like war with Taiwan or something. So, thank you both for participating and being awesome. Go Birds! It is Super Bowl Sunday this weekend. The Eagles are going to win. If they don't, I will not be here because I'm going to jump into the river. Outside of that, have a good week, guys. Enjoy
You
it.
do.
Be safe. We got 2 winter storms coming. I don't know if you do, Cody, but me and James do.
No, you probably do.
Me and James do. So yeah, thank you again, and we'll see you next week.